The President recognizes Senator Albert for the purposes of giving a statement.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a very important and time-sensitive proposal to discuss today. The clock is literally ticking here. Of course, it's early March, so this pressing issue could be none other than the rapidly approaching time change. In case you missed it, daylight saving time begins this weekend. This week I introduced Senate Bill 770, which would place on the November ballot the question of staying on standard time or springing ahead for daylight saving time. Before introducing this bill, I spent some time looking at the genesis of daylight saving time and researching whether or not the time change has been successful in accomplishing anything. In 1918, daylight saving time was adopted through the Standard Time Act. This bill was enacted primarily because Germany had undertaken a similar measure supposing it would save energy. This was not a proven hypothesis. Once the war ended, it became clear Americans wanted to get back to standard time. Twice, Congress sent President Woodrow Wilson a bill to repeal daylight saving time, and twice he vetoed it. A second time, the repeal became law through a congressional override, and national daylight saving time ended. Clearly, even from the beginning, daylight saving time was a contentious issue. For the next 23 years, the federal government stayed out of the time change business, but that ended in early 1942. Then President Franklin Roosevelt implemented what he coined wartime, which was a permanent year-round daylight saving time. Again, Americans were dissatisfied with this policy, and wartime was repealed shortly after the conclusion of World War II in 1945. Finally, in 1966, the Uniform Time Act was signed into law, and it established a national daylight saving time, but it did reserve the ability for individual states to exempt themselves. It is worth noting, in January 1974, during the energy crisis, a permanent daylight saving time was again implemented in what originally seemed to be a popular move. However, in short order, the American public quickly turned sour to the change. It was just too dark for too long in the morning. By the end of the year, the initiative was scrapped. In the fall, Americans started turning their clocks back to standard time. Until the Uniform Time Act was in place, the state of Michigan, or once the federal Uniform Time Act was in place, the state of Michigan put this issue up to a vote of the people, both in 1968 and 1972. Both votes were relatively close margins. At first, daylight saving time was rejected, but it subsequently passed. Throughout the history, the primary justification of supporting daylight saving time has been to save energy. Well, what does the evidence show? How much energy are we saving? Good luck finding a definitive answer to that question. At best, you will find mixed results. Some will show energy savings, but will have all sorts of caveats. Other research shows results that are inconclusive or contradictory. Energy savings aside, we also need to factor other considerations on how this policy impacts our daily lives. A University of Michigan study from 2014 found a 24% jump in the number of heart attacks on the Monday after the spring forward for daylight saving time. Loss of sleep and an interruption of the body's natural rhythm may be to blame. Other experts have written about negative health effects for teens facing sleep deprivation worsened by the spring time change, and the list could go on. So now here we are. It's over 100 years since we first adopted daylight saving time. And we find ourselves asking the question, why are we doing this? I, for one, cannot find a valid reason, and I've seen the time change both ways. When I was deployed to Iraq, I experienced what it was like to remain on standard time while everyone else back home changed their clocks. I was fascinated to learn that keeping the clocks constant did not result in the world coming to an end. An annoying disruption was removed, and it became apparent that remaining on standard time was more practical and reasonable. But no matter your feeling, daylight savings time is an issue that affects every Michigander in some way. After 52 years, it's time to bring this issue back to a vote to the people of Michigan. I know how I would vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Would you like your remarks printed in the Journal? Without objection, so ordered.